That's a cutaway view of our 25 kilowatt engine, and there it is in the test stand. There's a 4-cylinder version of it, and what we're doing is we're using the cylinder in the hot part as common and having a single crankshaft that connects the 4 cylinders, and we're distributing 4 of those little polyphase generators, 2 of them in each one of these housings, and that gives us a 100 kilowatt version of the engine. So
now 100 kilowatts will power
about 20 houses,
okay.
maybe a little more.
Okay, so if you had a community, for instance,
It would power a small community.
So if a developer were to buy this type of engine, what would they spend for a system like this?
25 kilowatt would initially cost about $25,000, and eventually we'll drop the price to $15,000, and this would be 4 times that, so $100,000 dropping to $60,000.
But you would need the solar to connect with it, or
you could run it off natural gas.
Oh, really?
So ideally, what you might do in a community is put this in a little cement vault just in a corner.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't even know it's sitting there running, and it's providing electricity for the community plus the hot water. It could heat the community swimming pool, could do all sorts of things. So it's and almost no maintenance. You just sit there and run continuously. You wouldn't even know it's there.
It makes no noise or anything.
Yeah, right. It sounds like a little sewing machine almost. I mean, the noise is, the only thing you hear is the gas burner like on your furnace. That's all you're really hearing. So some of the components that we built, this is the heater head. It's made of Haynes 230. All of those tubes with the little flutes are inside these. You can see the manifolds. This is all electron beam welded. So we developed all that. And here it is inside the cylinder, the inner shell. And here's the inner and outer shell on the dual shell. And then that's that exhaust heat exchanger with all the little thimbles.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be making a cast version of that. So the casting drops the price from like $50,000 a piece down to about $1,000 or less. So very important when we start to cast parts.
Oh.
This is the only exotic piece of metal that's made out of that molybdenum material. The reason that you use this is that it transfers heat very well, but also it's very strong under high temperature and pressure. Okay. So when we develop things like a floating Kovar seal and all that other things. So that's our engine. This is the reactor that I showed you back there. We water cool the lid. We're putting hydrogen in. We're controlling the pressure and temperature, and we've run reactions in here already that show that it works. So this is what it looks like on the inside. So we're electrically heating it, and we're viewing it through a little quartz window to look at the reaction. This is filled with the liquid, and this is just a secondary metal liner to help. We put a magnesium oxide powder in here to help, it's for safety. That way if anything leaks out, it stops. The powder stops it. It's inert. And it also acts like an insulator, and then we can use a regular insulation out in here. So that's fairly elegant. No moving parts on this. I think Ken mentioned a little door that closes at night for solar, so that heat can't come back out. If you were to look in there, it'd be glowing. Look like the sun. Okay, so that's a picture of a 100 kilowatt facility. This reactor would be about 8 feet in diameter and 10 feet high. We use an 18-inch window at the top, and we're heating it through a little heat pipe, and that heats the liquids down here. We're pulling the heat off to run a 4-cylinder version of that engine you saw, the Stirling engine, and during the day we're taking the hydrogen that comes off of here. So when the sunlight breaks this apart, we cool the hydrogen down and put it into hydride bottles, and then at night we put it back into here. That heat runs this. So it's very elegant. It just repeats itself. So
that's essentially the battery here.
Yeah, this is the battery, and that's the hydrogen storage.
That's the storage. I look at a battery as being the storage for the power, but this is the
hydrogen storage.
The element for the storage.
Yeah, right.
Okay, right.
Right, so you're chemically storing the energy here, and you're storing the hydrogen as a gas within a powder here. So we've done things like work up the physics of how this works. You know, basically this is high temperature. So when you're on one side of the curve, it creates calcium hydride. When you're on the other side of the curve, it creates calcium and hydrogen, and you either produce heat or absorb it. And we looked at all the efficiencies of the system and tried to look at the losses, and it's we've basically done a lot of analysis, both from a technical standpoint but also from a cost standpoint, so we understand the cost numbers very well.
Good.
So this is the 100 kilowatt system. So this is one of those dishes. These would be 43 feet in diameter, standing about 25 feet tall here.
So those will take the place of your typical solar collectors, right?
That's right. And what they're doing is they're beaming sunlight over to this mirror, and that's beaming it down into that hole. Okay?
Wow.
And they follow the sun.
You're just intensifying the sunlight to about 7,200 suns.
That's right.
The heat.
Right. So yeah, thank you. So we ran some codes to look at the sunlight. The sun actually has a finite diameter, and that's this angle here.
We're getting too angled there.
Yeah, is that better?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay, so it turns out that small angle, plus or minus 0.3 degrees, controls whether you can beam the sunlight. So we ran some detailed optics, and you can see these light beams come in here, they bounce off the hyperbolic mirror, and they form a constant diameter light beam. The blue is the center line, and the yellow is the plus or minus 0.3. And what we found out is when you start to focus the light, the off angle gets worse. And you notice the beam turns inside out. So it's actually designed, and the beam's crossing over itself, even though it's all same diameter. So the lines of all the energy from the sun that were here are now spread out more, but we focused them, and then we focus it once more, and so everything goes down into the quartz window. It's very elegant.
I'd hate to be inside that thing.
Well, this beam you could fly a bird through. This one here, these outer beams, they're only 50 to 1. You'd feel it if you put your hand through it. It'd be hot. This beam is the one you want to avoid, but it's only a few feet above the reactor. And that one's 7,000 to 1. When all the beams converge, that's where it's a lot of power going in. So we've done detailed design.
Oh, keep it down.
Oh, sorry. That's the small dish, the 43 that you saw here. We're looking at two sizes of reactor, 100 kilowatt, and then one that's 100 times bigger. So a 10 megawatt system would use much larger dishes. So this is a 250 foot diameter dish. Big. It's like the windmills you see out in the desert, except that's a solar dish. The power that comes off of this light beam is 30 feet in diameter. So you can imagine. But it turns out you can beam light about 300 feet with the small one. With the big one you can beam it over 1,200 feet. So it turns out the size determines how far you can beam the sunlight before it turns inside out. So,
and what is this? Oh, that's just
that's a close-up of the knuckle on the back side.
Okay.
So, we've done things like look into special coatings to where water beads up and cleans itself. These are hydrophilic coatings. The technology actually came from the Lotus plant. They noticed that special fibers on the surface causes the water to bead up. So anyway, we're going to be applying this to the mirrors so that they self-clean. NASA and Department of Energy are starting to look into this. So, okay, so this is a top view of a 10 megawatt system. So this is 100 times bigger. So this is a quarter square mile. It's big. This is those big dishes you saw. But that's putting 10 megawatts of electricity out 24 hours a day. So these are commercial power plants.
Now, what would that power?
Oh, you're starting to power cities, small cities and things. So what we're looking at is clustering these out in the desert to where we're actually creating gigawatts of electricity. So it's 1,000 megawatts. So, and this is, so what we did is we looked at the economics, and once you get out to a size about this big, you're down to where you're producing electricity as cheap as the hydro dams. Nice, huh? So you're at 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour.
And it's sustainable, and it's renewable, and
That's right.
It's not going to go away until the sun does, and then who cares?
Well, then we're storing it in the chemicals. So this is just a skewed view of those dishes. And we came up with a way to beam the sunlight even backwards through these different techniques. So we can completely surround the center system. So this is definitely commercial when you start to talk about this scale. These are going to go into sales production at about $50 million each and eventually go down to 25 million. The smaller ones are more like this system is like $1 million, and then it'll drop down to about $500,000 for the complete system. So you get the dishes, the storage, and the engine. And we're designing it for like a 30-year life with very low maintenance. Detailed designs of the storage tanks for the 10 megawatt. So these are like 20 feet in diameter and 30 feet tall. So they're good size. So, and Alaskan Copper can build things like this. So the sizing, so what we've done for large scale manufacturing is we looked at sizes that would ship by train. So if you need to ship, say, from Washington to Texas, or, you know, the logic here of these gigawatt systems is we want these spread out in the Texas area and all along the bottom, and they can supply all the electricity for the United States by this with baseload power. It's very, very, it's a nice solution.